If you've never heard of this before, strap yourself in. This is a good one. How do we get from 1 million to 2 million? That's a bit like the Yosemite Falls, right? It's a little bit like a waterfall. D is going to be rather splendid, and D is going to take us all the way up to here. Who's responsible, who's accountable, so that we know who the cast of characters are. There is a supporting plan for each of these blocks. It can also show things going south. Don't forget that market degradation. The cake doesn't seem to be getting bigger all of the time. It doesn't have to look like this, could look like this, right? Could be going down, could be up. There are lots and lots and lots and lots of interesting ways to represent information and data. If you've ever searched online for something like, how can I improve my organization's planning process, or maybe how can I track my company's progress effectively, or how should I prepare for a project review meeting, or how can I ensure my project report is clear and concise, maybe what tools can help my project documentation outcome, all of that stuff. Maybe how do I create a plan on a page perhaps? You're in luck, because this episode is for you. What those questions are really talking about, more than anything else, I think, is asking about strategic planning tools and models. And so today we're diving deep into the concept of plan on a page, which is an essential framework that can transform your approach to planning and reporting and leading. So keep watching, because we've put together this episode specifically to help improve your strategic planning skills so that you can finally stop managing and start leading. So welcome to Stop Managing and Start Leading, the podcast for leaders who need to stop managing and for managers who want to start leading. And I'm your host, Antonio Garrido, the founder and president of My Daily Leadership. I'm a serial entrepreneur, I'm a business founder and a leader just like you. I'm a 3-time author and have led businesses from the ground level startups all the way to Fortune 60s with billions of revenue and thousands of employees. And what if I told you that the secret to exceptional leadership is much easier, much closer, much quicker than you think? Every leader, every manager has the potential to become exceptional, the kind of leader that they, their people, and their business, and their customers, right, deserve. And you're no exception. You simply need to discover the mindsets, tools, competencies, and habits to unlock that amazing potential. And that's where we come in. If you haven't already, please do give the subscribe button a visit and some love today. So subscribe to the My Daily Leadership YouTube channel today for actionable insights and practical tools in our podcast episodes that drop every single week. And if you're listening on a podcast platform, I hear the follow button is lovely just around this time of year. And both will help you to level up your leadership, so do it now. We often start with a story, so settle in, it's story time. When I was managing my first sizable business, and it was rather big, with lots of people, lots of moving parts, lots of complications, around the first week or so, my boss asked me for a summary of all of the plans and all of the initiatives that the whole organization was working on. Now, that was a big ask. So I thought, why? Because we had lots of people working on lots and lots and lots of tasks. So, as a dutiful leader, I sent out a huge pro forma to everybody, and I asked all of my teams to put everything together in one place, all uniform, all the same, and we had it bound. And I do mean bound. It wasn't stapled, it was bound. It's the kind of thing that if it fell on your foot, well, you'd need to go to the emergency room for an x-ray. It's going to age me, but it was like the bloomin' New York Yellow Pages, right? So when I held it in my hand, or hands, it was heavy. But you know what? I was quite proud of all of the initiatives that we had in place, and of all of the thinking and all of the activity behind all of the work that we were doing. This is really clever stuff, I thought. If this didn't justify my salary and my parking space right by the front door, well, then nothing would. Now, this wasn't my first rodeo, so I knew well enough to include there was a really great executive summary with really detailed content pages, because I realized there was a lot of information in there. There was even color-coded tabs and dividers, and it was, I thought, quite a good document. Well, a series of documents, really. It was a weighty tome, but it was good stuff, right? So I had 3 pack horses deliver the whole bound document to the group chairman's office, and I was proud as punch with myself and my team and the brave people who collated the whole document. Well, I did feel a bit sorry for the trees that had to die in the making of the thing, but hey, this was big business, baby, and there was always a few casualties along the way, right? So, a few days passed. The excitement grew. The chairman returned from his trip and he would see the document that day. And then he would be charging into my office to congratulate me for being such a clever old sausage, for sure. So a few hours later, well, he did charge into my office, but not to congratulate me. Now, to slightly paraphrase that modern great thinker and philosopher, Shania Twain, who else basically came to my office with a Sherpa or two, with the document in tow to declare, hey, that don't impress me much. Now, I was absolutely horrified, as you can imagine, because I thought for sure he'd appreciate the hard work and the effort that we had all expended, and the trees, the sacrifices that trees make, all right, putting it all together. Substance, I thought, always wins over style, right? Nope. Turns out that nope is the answer to that question. What am I supposed to do with this? He asked. Fair question. Read it, perhaps? I offered, maybe a little bit weakly. Look, he said, just give me all of this, right? Give me all of this on one piece of paper, he demanded. And he said, look, if you can't figure out how to say all of this on one piece of paper, it's because you don't understand it. And you know what? I guess he was kind of right. Einstein said the same thing. And who's going to argue with Einstein? Give me a graph, he said. Give it to me in a RAG file. That means red, amber, green. The stuff that's bad in red, the stuff that's okay in amber, and the stuff that we're happy with in green, right? RAG file. And then make it so that an idiot, he said, make it so that an idiot at speed can understand it. Not only an idiot, but an idiot in a hurry, he said. Those are his words, not mine. Don't be offended. This was a long time ago and the world was different then, but you get the idea. And with that, he and the Sherpas left, right? And that's when I think I changed the way that I compiled, reported, and communicated my plans to my boss and to others. And that's what I'm going to share with you today. It's called Plan on a Page. Do try and adopt and adapt this to fit your world. Okay, so we have a new model. Here we go. If you typically join us on YouTube, you'll know that we're always introduce you to a critical leadership model or two, and we draw them out in real time. Why? Because we're visual learners here at My Daily Leadership. We're VLs. Now, if you're listening on a podcast platform, because you're much more of an auditory learner, you're part of our ALs, and that's great. But if you want to actually see the content that we're about to talk about drawn out in real time today, then do switch over to YouTube now or later. But rest assured that the models that we draw in this episode and all past and future episodes will be available as a complimentary download on our snazzy little website, www.mydailyleadership.com/podcasts. Okay, all of that to say, shall we begin? Okay, so as you know, we typically start these with a question. Today's question is, how can I track progress on just one piece of paper? Pretend that says peace. Okay, so before we get into that, we covered a few sessions ago something called a waterfall. We didn't cover it in any detail really, but we covered a waterfall diagram. So another question might be, what can leaders learn from Yosemite Falls, for example? So Yosemite Falls, for those of you that don't know, because we're going to go do a deeper dive into the, it kind of worked, doesn't it? Deeper dive into the waterfall. Anyway, so let's see where we get to. So Yosemite Falls. So for those of you that know from the West Coast, Yosemite Falls is in California, and Yosemite Falls kind of comes along, right? So you've got Yosemite Creek, because waterfalls always start from tiny little things, right? And so Yosemite Creek goes along, and then it falls 1,430 feet. How do I know that? Don't know, don't ask, right? So that's like the upper falls, and then it goes along for about 800 feet, right? And then it drops again another 240 feet, and then it tootles along again, and then it comes down 105 feet, right? So a big one, smaller one, 105 feet. Then it zips along a little bit more, and then it falls down again another 23 feet. And then right at the end, something rather dramatic happens, and it goes down 354 feet, okay? That's Yosemite Falls. It's like it's a series of falls. And really the whole thing, I guess, is characterized in 3 stages, which is the upper falls, the unsurprisingly middle falls, and no biscuits for knowing it's the lower falls, right? Okay, cool. So that's a waterfall. That's what Yosemite Falls looks like. It goes along a bit, drops a bit, goes along a bit, drops a bit, goes along a bit, drops a bit. And that is what I want to talk about today. Now, some of you watching, listening today will go, Antonio, we know about waterfall diagrams, waterfall models. We know it. I get it. But just bear with me, because there's some parts of it that maybe you're not so familiar with. And if you've never heard of this before, strap yourself in. This is a good one, right? So I'm going to give you in its most basic form. And we're going to dig into it in a few different ways. But if you think about this as a principle, kind of turn it on its head slightly. You don't have to go too far, probably just a quick bus stop and a walk across the park to think that you can take this thing over here and apply it to something that looks like this. If we imagine down here we have time, and if we imagine down here, we have revenue, for example. For our auditories, just a graph, right, with time along the bottom and revenue along the left-hand side. It's a y-axis, right? Everybody's very familiar with that. What we could actually do, if you think about it, we could say, well, here we're starting down here. We don't start at zero always. So let's imagine that last year we did $1 million in revenue. So we're going to say that our starting point is 1 million. And we want to figure out the plan. What does the plan look like to get us to 2 million? And again, we're doing this in very simple basis just to make sure everyone's on the same page. Plan on a page, right? And then we'll get into more complications as we go along. So over time, over the year, we want to figure out, how do we get from 1 million to 2 million? Well, we can do something that sits in here, and we're going to say that that's A. We'll talk about what A is in a minute, and A is probably going to take us to, I don't know, 1.2, for example. And then we're going to do something a little bit bigger. We're going to call this B, whatever that initiative looks like. And then we're going to do C, and C isn't quite as big. C is just going to take us, one of the smaller steps of this falls. We're going to call that C. And then D is going to be rather splendid, and D is going to take us all the way up to here, whatever D looks like. E is going to take us beyond, actually, just beyond 2 million. And then actually we're going to lose a bit because of F. And we're going to end up, hopefully, By the time we get to here, that's about our 2 million mark. You get the idea, right? So that where we end up here is our 2 million, and where we start here is our 1 million. Terrific. And it doesn't take too much of a leap in imagination to think, okay, that's a bit like the Yosemite Falls, right? It's a little bit like a waterfall, okay? And then it doesn't take too much of a leap in imagination thinking that each of these plans, right? So plan A looks like something, plan B looks like something, plan C looks like something, E and F. And then there is a supporting plan for each of these blocks, right? I'm sure you're following me easily. What each of these blocks might look like then is you would Pareto these blocks, or Price's law. We talked about that recently. So you do a Pareto or Price's, and for each of those, right, you would probably end up, you're probably very familiar with the acronym R.A.C.I. What does R.A.C.I stand for? Well, R.A.C.I stands for responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed. So you do a R.A.C.I for each of these blocks, A, B, C, D, E. Responsible, that is the people that are going to actually deliver the tasks, right? Accountable is the person with the ultimate ownership. Like who's the champion of that project, right? Consulted is who needs to be given advance notice or advice, or who needs to give feedback, right? So let's just put feedback as a shorthand of that. And then informed, who needs to know, right? So you can imagine, I'm sure, I hope, that if we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 kind of big projects that are going to take us from 1 million to 2 million, in the top left-hand corner of one piece of paper, we could have here this waterfall diagram. And then we could have A, B, C, D, E, F. We could Pareto or Price the main issues. And then we could do a little R.A.C.I beside each of those, saying who's responsible, who's accountable, so that we know who the cast of characters are for each of those plans. And maybe even each of these, A, B, C, D, E, and F, each of them falls on their own page behind, so that we take A and put that on one page, because that A, I'm sure you're already with me, that A can probably have its own little waterfall too, right? Certainly have its own little waterfall on, page A, following page, with R.A.C.I and all of that kind of stuff. And that means that this whole document that I gave to our group chairman could actually have probably certainly summarized on one page, this here, like in the waterfall diagram with all of the components shown on that one page. Color coded at any point in time. What does that mean? Well, I'll show you another spin on this in a couple of moments. But at any particular point in time, you could print off this page, and if A, for example, was on track, you'd make that. So if A was on track, that would be color-coded green. If B was on track, that would also be green wherever we are at that point in time. If C was behind a little, maybe the C is in amber. The D, if that's behind, that could be in red, that could be in red, and that could be in green. Okay, why? So that an idiot at speed could see as they were running past, right? If this was, tacked to the notice board, they could be running past, and with a flash would be able to see whether or not our whole organization is on track, ahead or behind. in terms of the color-coded waterfall. If they then applied the brakes and went to go and have a closer look, they could see who was in charge of all of these reds and ambers and greens, and then go and congratulate some people and go and chat to some others. You get the idea. Okay, let's go a little bit deeper into it with our next diagram. So just before we get into our next model, we're just going to tear ourselves away from strategic planning just for a second to talk about our pretty groovy leadership health check tool. If you're watching this episode, you'll likely want to become an extraordinary leader. Hurrah! And if you're investing time and effort and energy in your leadership development, wonderful. That's what we're all about. So we're happy. However, if you're only at the start of that journey, it's important to know exactly where you're starting from, right? And where the gaps are and how those gaps are limiting yourself, your people, and your business, and how then you might start to intentionally close those gaps by developing your strengths and, more importantly, perhaps by ameliorating or improving on your weaknesses. To that end, therefore, I highly recommend that you head to www.mydailyleadership.com, or you click the link in the description right now and diagnose your leadership challenges in only 5 minutes. That's how long it'll take with our leadership health check tool. The good news is you'll come away with a clear diagnosis and a leadership development roadmap to help you on the rest of your journey. And it's free. What does free mean? It means it's free. And don't forget to share your thoughts, questions, comments, and aha moments in the comments too. We would really, really, genuinely love to hear from you. So let's dive back into this model and just have a look at it in a couple of other different and hopefully interesting ways. So waterfall models can, as we've just demonstrated, can kind of track things going up. You know, we do a lot of work at our place with manufacturing organizations. And I only say that just to demonstrate a different use of the waterfall model. It could, for example, if you think about it, we could have a manufacturing company that manufactures a component and it costs, the fully wrapped up cost of that component is $9.36. What that is, don't know. But this is cost per unit, for example. And actually, what we want to do is we want to reduce the cost of the unit. So we might say down here is, for example, $8.70. So if it's $9.36, we want to get it down to $8.70 by year 2. But our year 1 goal, right, might be, let's say $8.95. And what we could do is we could start to figure out what are the things that we would have to do. What are the things that we could do? And in another video, we'll tell you all about ways of figuring all of these things out. How do we figure out what all of these blocks kind of can look like, right? And we might say, but these are the things that we're going to do such that by the end of year 1, we're going to be at $8.95, and then we're going to figure out year 2, how to get down to $8.70. And of course, in this very, very similar way as we just described, each of those is going to have some thinking behind it, right? Makes sense? By the way, for those that are interested, because I know that a lot of our chaps are, all of this, if you want to do some further reading around the subject and some research, Dr. Winston W. Royce. And if that's not a name to conjure with, I don't know what it is, but he was a software developer. I'm pretty sure he was British, but don't hold me to that. He may not have been. You don't have to write to me and let me know. But anyway, it certainly was in 1970 that he developed this. So not only can it show things going north, it can also show things going south. You could also, if you can imagine it, you could have a waterfall that says, okay, we finished last year on 1 million in terms of revenue, and we want to get to 2 million in terms of revenue. And I'm always very encouraged when I see the first block of a waterfall going south. So it actually means that whilst we ended the year on 1 million in revenue, we recognize that there's normally in our market a 14% decrease year on year. And that could be something to do with consolidation, could be something to do with imports, it could be something to do with costs, it could be something to do with technology, right? But there's typically some around 10-11% decrease year on year. So you're actually not starting from a million, you're starting from a million minus 10 or 14%. And you then have to figure out, how do we go north of that number, right, to get us to our 2 million. So please, please, please don't forget that market degradation. And most of our clients and most of the world, you know, the cake doesn't seem to be getting bigger all of the time. A lot of markets are pretty stagnant year on year. Not everyone is, but some of them aren't. Some of them are going backwards. Well, what does that tell me? Well, that tells me and anybody else that looks at it that what we also have to do, if the cake isn't getting any bigger and perhaps it's getting smaller, then we need to figure out how to take market share from our competitors. Because if the market isn't getting any bigger, we've got to slice it up differently. That means we may have to aggressively, certainly assertively, take some market share from some of our competitors, and that needs its own plan, right? So that A, B, C, D, E on here, that A is all about market share gains, for example. Another way you might want to think about it, which I also think is pretty cool, that you can also have a waterfall that looks like this. Let's see if I can figure out how to, I'm not even sure how I'm going to describe it for our auditory learners, but I don't even know how to describe it, so please do go and have a look at it. But this again can be dollars, right? It could be pounds, it could be euro, whatever that looks like, however you're measuring success, right? How do we measure how we're doing? You know, little pieces of paper with dead presidents' heads on are normally a pretty good way to do it. So that's why we have money, right? But anyway, you could do this whole thing, you could do, because this doesn't kind of take into account, this takes into account big blocks of activity and results and planning and so on, but not time so much always. So you could do a Q1, Q2, Q3, and Q4, and you could say in Q1, this is what it looks like, Q2, this is what it looks like, Q3, this is what it looks like, and then Q4, this is what it looks like. You get the idea, right? I am sure. Another way, if you think about taking all of these, right, everything here, for example, and think of it like the church roof fund. You must have been to a church and seen, even if it's only for a wedding or a christening, right, you've seen the church roof fund thermometer, right? You see those thermometers where they're collecting for the church roof, and as they're collecting money, like the thermometer goes, you know, the little red thing. Is this making sense at all? Right, just the red bar moves up and up and up and up, like the church roof. If you take all of this stuff, listen, it doesn't take a genius to figure, you know what, this could be A, right? This could be B. I'm trying to get the scale right. That could be C. D was a little one here. E was another little one. F was about the same. G was about the same. And then H was quite a big one, right? If you think about it, what does that look like? Well, you can take all of this and it's a stacked waterfall, isn't it? If you think about it. So that's a stacked waterfall. right? It doesn't have to look like this, could look like this, right? It could be going down, could be up. You could stack it so that here is A, and that's B, and that's C, and that's D, and that's E, and that's F, and that's G, and that's H, just as we saw over there, right? And then each of those has its own particular plan. Each of those has a R.A.C.I, as we mentioned earlier. You get the idea. When we get creative, and there are lots of books about, how to make data interesting. You've probably seen those maps that show you mapped by electrical usage, right? And you can see in a map heat maps, right? Traffic in Miami, right? Where I lived for about 10, 12 years, right? There are lots and lots and lots and lots of interesting ways to represent information and data such that an idiot at speed can understand it. Please do figure out how to take everything that you are doing and represent it in this way. Find a way to graphically represent it. Make sure everyone understands who's responsible, right? That whole R.A.C.I piece. Make sure everybody understands when it comes in, when it comes out. And all of this on one piece of paper. What could you do with this piece of paper, I wonder? Well, I mentioned earlier you could tack it to notice boards. Just the notice board in the boardroom? No, why not every notice board in the whole organization? Right? If you're proud of what you're doing, let everybody know. If you're struggling with what you're doing, let everybody know. Let everybody know what it looks like. No one's going to read an annual general report other than the board, the executive suite, maybe the key stakeholders and shareholders. That's not what people are interested in. Give them a visual representation of what's going on and who's responsible for which bits. Encourage everybody, if there's anyone on here that's red, encourage them to go and knock on somebody's door and ask them some searching questions perhaps. Figure out how to get everything you're doing on one piece of paper. When you can do that, boy, does it bring some focus, because you know what? That huge tome that I delivered to my chairman, somewhere in there was probably hiding all of this, and all of this is a distillation of that. Remember, there's information and there's data. Data is very broad. Who's interested in data? Nobody. Information is a subset of data. It's something that you can work with. So I'm encouraging all of you leaders out there, take that broad information that you have and convert it into data. Once we can convert information into data, we can then take that data and convert it into knowledge. We can then convert that into insight. We can then convert that into foresight. We can then convert that into R.A.C.I. Okay, I've said enough, I think. Thanks once again, as ever, for tuning in to Stop Managing and Start Leading in My Daily Leadership Podcast. I hope you're enjoying it. Whatever your reason for listening or watching or visiting us today, I do hope that this episode offered you something to think about, something of value, even if it's just one tool, one tip that improves your leadership ability by only 1%. Remember, there's immense power in marginal gains over time. There's also power in community. So please do share your questions, share your insights, we're just talking about that, and any topic suggestions that you might have in the comments. If there is something that's troubling you, let us know. We'll do a video about it. If it's troubling you, it's probably troubling somebody else too. If you're watching on YouTube, thanks very much. And whilst you're down there, why not give the video a thumbs up, give it a like, subscribe. You know you want to. And for our auditory learners, our ALs, as ever, you're only getting half of the story. We love you, I'm afraid, but if you don't go to YouTube or go to our website and download all of these images, you're missing out. So www.mydailyleadership.com/podcasts. In the next episode, it's a good one. We're going to be talking about emotional intelligence. I'm very excited for this one. It's one of my favorite topics and most important topics, so I do hope you'll join me. My name is Antonio Garrido. Thanks for spending so much time with me. I do appreciate it. My Daily Leadership, thanks for being here. Until next time, by wisdom and effort, go figure that out. See you next time.